They were killed just days before Thanksgiving, and the strangest part was this: there were no signs of forced entry and no clear sign of a burglary, and the shell casings were gone. On the morning of November 23, 1987, Rick Brink and Gail Brink didn't show up for work. That wasn't like them. Concern turned into alarm fast, and before long, someone close to them drove over to the house to check in. What they found was beyond fixing. Rick was in his vehicle, in the driveway, 2 shots to the head, fired from close range. Gail was inside, in bed, 3 shots, and a pillow pressed over her face. It didn't look like a struggle, it looked like an execution. They were young, in love, and just starting their adult life together. They'd recently moved into their first home, were doing the repairs themselves, and were talking about having a baby. From the outside, it was the picture of a normal, quiet life, nothing that suggested anyone would want them dead. And yet, the case stalled for years. No arrests, no clear motive, until decades later, someone finally came forward. Someone who'd been carrying the truth the whole time. And what came out was heavy. How does a quiet, newlywed couple end up shot to death in their own home? Why would the killer cover Gail's face with a pillow? And what kind of secret could be big enough to cost 2 people their lives? November 23, 1987. Holland, Michigan. Thanksgiving is 3 days away. Family dinners, travel plans, last-minute shopping, all of it. You can feel it everywhere: fall wreaths on front porches, bundles of dried corn, pumpkins, and those colorful seasonal squashes people set out this time of year. Autumn is nearly over, but a few leaves still cling to the trees. Along quiet residential streets, Holland is in that calm, familiar, pre-holiday mood, which is exactly why it's hard to believe what's about to happen here. Gail and Rick Brink were locals. They were born in the area, grew up there, and that's where they met. Their friends were there, their families were there, their jobs were there. They were young, in love, making plans, looking ahead the way people do when life feels like it's just getting started. But in just a few days, that normal future is going to be cut short. And before we get to that night, it helps to understand who this couple was. Before she got married, Gail's last name was Wingarden. She was born on April 24, 1965, to Wendell and Dorothea Wingarden. It was a loud house, 7 kids. Money was tight, but nobody went hungry. And by the way people close to the family described it, there was real care in that home, the kind that comes from everyone pulling together. Growing up, Gail watched her parents work hard just to keep a big family afloat. And pretty early on, she made a simple decision for herself. She wanted a different kind of life, something steadier, something more secure. Not just getting by, but feeling like she had solid ground under her feet. At 16, she got a job as a waitress. The base pay wasn't much, but in the US, tips can make all the difference, and if you're good at the job, you can earn decent money. Gail learned quickly how to carry herself with confidence. She was good with people, especially with men, and it didn't go unnoticed. But there was always someone watching her closely: her brother, Ryan. He was a little more than 2 years older, and he could be strict with her. He understood the attention she got wasn't going to stop, and he tried to keep a tight grip on the situation. By the time she was 20, Gail was working at Donnelly, a company in the auto parts world, and it was around then that she met a tall, athletic guy with thick hair. Rick Brink. His friends called him Rick, and that's what we'll call him too. Rick was 28. He worked in the furniture business in the Holland area, and he came from a comfortable background. His parents had a place on Lake Michigan, a detail that comes up more than once in people's memories of Rick's life. Rick noticed Gail right away, and according to people close to him, he told his mother that same day that he was going to marry her, that she was his person. But there was one complication. At the time, Gail was still in a relationship. Not for long, she ended it, and she and Rick began building a life together. By October 1987, Rick and Gail were already living together, still working on their house. There was plenty left to do, But it didn't scare them. They were doing the work themselves. Little by little, they were turning it into a home they planned to stay in. Their plans were simple and grown up. Keep working, keep building, get established. And they both wanted kids. They even talked about one of the rooms becoming a nursery. But this isn't a happily ever after story. On Saturday, November 21st, 1987, Rick and Gail got ready for a wedding party for one of Rick's old high school friends. It was in Holland. A normal night. Music, dancing, congratulations. Around 11 o'clock p.m., they thanked the newlyweds and headed home. It was the last time anyone is known to have seen them alive. Sunday passed quietly. Then Monday morning, November 23rd, neither Rick nor Gail showed up for work. For Rick, that was especially out of character. He was dependable. He didn't just disappear. His coworkers tried calling. No answer. So they reached out to his family. Then someone called Gail's workplace, and they said the same thing. She hadn't come in. At that point, the worry was too strong to ignore. His family and his employer drove to the couple's home on Ransom Street in Park Township. As soon as they pulled up, they saw Rick's vehicle in the driveway, and almost immediately, they saw a shape in the front seat. It was Rick. There was blood everywhere, and on his head were 2 clear bullet wounds. They called police. When officers arrived, it didn't take long to confirm what the family already feared. Rick was dead. 2 gunshots to the head leave no chance. Officers went inside and carefully checked the rooms. Everything looked calm, nothing ransacked, nothing smashed, nothing suggesting a struggle. Then they walked down the hallway and opened the bedroom door. Gail was in the marital bed. At first glance, it could have looked like she was sleeping. A pillow was covering her face. Officers called her name, but she didn't respond. One of them lifted the pillow, and it was immediately clear why. The sheet beneath her head was soaked through with blood. She'd been shot 3 times at close range. Her face was badly damaged. It was a double murder. Investigators start a careful walkthrough of the scene. There's no gun. There are no shell casings either. It feels like someone picked them up on purpose and took them away. The only bullets left are the ones still inside the victims. Detectives determine it was a .22 caliber weapon. What's eerie is how clean everything looks. No obvious shoe prints, no foreign hairs, no blood anywhere except the victim's own. And yet, technicians do recover 6 fingerprints. 2 belong to Rick and Gail. The rest are run through the system, but there are no matches. Gail is 22. Rick is 28. They'd been married about 1.5 years. The house was their project, their new start, and in a single night, it became the place where they were executed. What had to happen for someone to walk in calmly and shoot them both? Even the timeline is only a rough estimate. Investigators believe it happened late Saturday night, or in the early hours of Sunday morning. There weren't nearby neighbors close enough to say they heard anything that could pin down an exact time. The first theory is a burglary that went sideways. But the biggest problem is obvious. The house isn't torn apart. Nothing is tossed. On the kitchen table, personal items are still sitting out: a purse, watches, documents, a wallet. Even cash is still there. If this was a robbery, why leave the money behind? The next idea is murder-suicide. Could Rick have shot Gail, then shot himself out in the vehicle? But that theory falls apart almost immediately. Nobody close to them believes it, and there's one hard fact that kills it. There's no weapon anywhere. Not in the house, not in the vehicle. It's simply gone. If Rick did it, where did the gun go? With 2 bullets in his head, he wasn't going anywhere. As they examine the vehicle more closely, detectives notice something else that doesn't fit. There are shards of glass on the passenger seat and on the floor. The passenger side window is broken, while the driver's window is slightly down. Why? No one has a solid answer. It just adds another layer of questions. A third theory comes from Gail's brother, Ryan Wingarden. He points investigators toward Lars, a former boyfriend of Gail's. Ryan says there had been serious conflict between Lars and Gail in the past, and even a couple years later, Lars may not have let it go. Jealousy, anger, the fact that she'd moved on, gotten married, started a new life. Detectives look into Lars. He denies everything, and more importantly, he has a solid alibi. He also takes a polygraph, but investigators don't publicly discuss the results. Then there's another theory shakier, but still checked. The former owner of the home, Sid Kaloubi, known around the area as Shotgun Sid, reaches out to investigators himself. He suggests the murders could have been connected to him. He'd been involved with drugs in the past. He claimed he had enemies, and he said there had been attempts on his life. His idea was simple. Maybe the killer meant to hit him, mistook Rick for him, and Gail became collateral damage. On paper, it sounds possible. In reality, it doesn't go anywhere. So detectives widen the lens. They start looking at the area, at other violent incidents, at anything that feels even remotely similar. And a thought starts to form: what if there's someone nearby who's done this before? About a month later, on Christmas night, another murder happens not far away. Deborah Wilson, 30 years old, is killed. Her husband comes home late and immediately senses something is wrong. Lights are on, and a door leading outside is open. He calls police and also calls his father, who lives nearby. Together, they search and they find Deborah outside, not far from the home. Her throat has been cut. The distance between these houses isn't much, basically the same area, and the similarities are hard to ignore. No sign of forced entry, nothing valuable stolen, and the violence feels deliberate. Deborah had gone to the same high school as Rick. They had overlapping connections. People start to wonder if someone in the area is going to strike again. Investigators ask the same question: are these cases connected? Then another case resurfaces from years earlier. In 1977, in the same general area, 20-year-old Deborah Polinsky was murdered. She was sexually assaulted and then stabbed to death. 3 brutal cases in the same region, and it's hard not to think about the possibility of a serial offender. But when police dig into it, they don't find a direct link. The methods are different. The crime scenes don't line up. There's no evidence that confidently ties the cases together. And once again, the Brink investigation stalls. Rick and Gail didn't have obvious enemies, so another possibility creeps in. What if this was a mistake? What if the killer was actually after a different couple and simply went to the wrong house? That's happened before, and sometimes that kind of explanation is scarier than any serial killer theory. If you go back to Rick's vehicle, there's one detail that really sticks. The driver's window was partly down, and that matters. If Rick lowered it on purpose, it suggests he was about to talk to someone. And if that's true, then whoever was outside didn't feel like an obvious threat to him. Most people don't roll a window down at night for a stranger. They do it when they think they know who they're dealing with, at least enough not to be on guard. And then there's the detail inside the house that's hard to shake. Gail is in bed, 3 close-range shots, her face badly damaged, and on top of her, a pillow, like someone was trying to cover what they'd just done. Sometimes that happens when a killer can't stand to look at the scene, or when the victim isn't just somebody, but someone they knew, and that makes it worse, not better. The more you line up details like that, the harder it is to ignore the same feeling. This may not have been random. It may have been someone from close by, someone inside their world. Meanwhile, police do what they can. They interview more than 200 people. Some are looked at more closely than others. Some get asked the same questions again and again, but it keeps coming back to the same thing: alibis. Months go by, and nothing really moves. Eventually, the investigation runs out of momentum, and the case slips into the cold files. More than 20 years pass. Whoever did this is still out there, and investigators still don't have a clear why, and they still don't have a suspect they can charge. Then, in 2009, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office forms a dedicated cold case unit. 2 years later, in 2011, detectives Venus Repper and David Blakely are assigned the Brink murders. They basically start over. They pull the boxes back out, reread everything, and work through it like it's new. Some of the paperwork is so old it's falling apart. Pages have to be handled carefully just to make the writing readable. And then it's back to people, family, friends, co-workers, anyone connected to Rick and Gail's lives. Even people who've moved out of state over the years still end up on the list. Repper and Blakely are clear about it. They want to speak with everyone who shows up anywhere in the file. And it's during this process that things inside Gail's family start to surface, pieces that were either overlooked before or never fit together at the time. The focus begins to shift in an unexpected direction toward Gail's older brother, Ryan Wingarden. Relatives remember him saying certain things not long after the murders. Comments that sounded bizarre back then, but years later became impossible to ignore. Ryan Mark Wingarden was born on December 12, 1962. He was a little more than 2 years older than Gail. Not much is known about his childhood beyond what he said himself, that the family didn't have much money and lived a fairly typical life, much like Gail did growing up. But where Gail tried to stay steady working, making plans, building towards something, Ryan, according to people who knew him, lived differently. He didn't hold down one stable job. It was a pattern of short-term work, then gaps, and he seemed more drawn to partying and illegal drugs than to any kind of routine or stability. For years, he had an on and off relationship with a woman named Crystal Beelan. It wasn't really a settled-down kind of relationship, more casual or inconsistent. They'd be together, then apart, then back again. Then in August of 1987, another woman enters the picture, Pam, whose maiden name was Marikini. Ryan and Pam start dating about 3 months before Rick and Gail are killed. Pam had a baby boy named Nathan. He was around 6 months old when she met Ryan. From the beginning, Ryan treated the child like his own, and that mattered a lot to Pam. Later, Ryan and Pam would get married, and together they would have 3 more children. But Ryan's habits didn't disappear, and over time, according to people around them, he became harsher and more controlling, especially in his relationships. We'll come back to that. Pam grew up in a difficult, unstable home. By her own account, her father drank heavily and could be controlling, so Ryan's harsh, controlling behavior didn't feel completely unfamiliar to her. It felt like a pattern she already knew. By 2011, when investigators pulled the case back out of the archives, Pam and Ryan had been married for many years. Pam was the primary breadwinner. The household depended on her. Ryan, according to people close to them, stayed home. He wasn't holding steady work, and over time there was more drinking and smoking in their day-to-day life. And there was one thing both women who knew Ryan well would later describe. When he drank too much, he started talking, saying out loud the things he usually kept to himself. That's how investigators later heard the same story from Pam, his wife, and Crystal Beelan, his former girlfriend. Told at different times, but with the same meaning. Ryan claimed that, when he and Gail were younger, there had been sexually inappropriate incidents between them. And he tried to frame it as if it wasn't that serious. At the same time, the case included a separate, darker thread. Crystal testified in court that Ryan admitted to sexually abusing his sister when they were teenagers. Even with everything that was coming out in these conversations, investigators still ran into a legal wall. Whatever happened back then would have been when Ryan himself was a minor. He insisted it was mutual, and Gail was no longer alive to confirm or deny anything he claimed. But for detectives, this wasn't just an uncomfortable side story. It looked like a possible key to motive. When they reached out to the family, they spoke with Cheryl Murphy, Gail's sister. It hit her hard right away. Cheryl said Gail had never told her or their parents anything about what may have happened between her and Ryan. And once Cheryl heard what was being said, she couldn't stop thinking about it. How did she not see it? And how did she not protect her sister? Whatever tension already existed between her and Ryan, this shattered it completely. And Cheryl remembered something else. Something that had sounded strange at the time, but now felt very different. After the funeral, Ryan had said things that stayed with her. According to Cheryl, at one point he said, "Sometimes I think, what if I did it? The way he said it was almost casual, like it was just a passing thought, not a terrifying question. And the worst part is, back then, the family didn't treat it as a warning sign. No one reported it to police. Back in 1987, right after the murders, Ryan didn't look like the kind of person who would automatically become the focus. He had an alibi backed up by his girlfriend, Pam Marachini, who later became his wife. The story was straightforward. That night, they went to do laundry first to a laundromat, then to their friend Rose's place to finish up, and after that, Ryan supposedly spent the night with Pam. But when the case was reopened in 2011, detectives started going back through the old records and noticed inconsistencies. They reached out to Pam again. She came in to talk, and Ryan showed up with her. He even tried to come into the interview room, but detectives wouldn't allow it. Pam repeated the same story. The laundromat, Rose, together all night. The interview went on for hours, and on paper, nothing changed. And for a while, that's how it went: meetings, phone calls, the same version repeated again and again. Until 2013, when detectives finally began hearing a different, far more troubling account from Pam, the one that would eventually break the case open. Detectives reach out to Pam again, this time at her workplace. She agrees to talk right there. At first, she sticks to the familiar story, the laundromat, Rose, together all night. But as the conversation goes on, something shifts. Her voice gets less certain. She hesitates. There are long pauses. And then she finally admits the central truth. The alibi was false. After that, detectives go straight to Ryan. They don't tiptoe around it. They tell him plainly, "We know the alibi is fake. Pam admitted it. We know you're lying." And Ryan responds like the conversation isn't even about a double murder. He brushes it off as if it's only about the past. "We were kids. We were just messing around. It was nothing." They let him go. But then something unusual happens. Ryan starts calling the detectives himself. He leaves dozens of voicemails, close to 30. And in those messages, he sounds more and more rattled. He demands they leave him alone. He accuses them of manipulating his wife. He keeps repeating that Pam is lying and the alibi is real. The more messages he leaves, the clearer it becomes. He's not in control, and he's panicking. The detectives realize Ryan is unstable, and if they wait too long, things could spiral, including for Pam. So they contact her again and ask for another meeting. Pam agrees, and again she talks to them at work, and this time, everything changes for good. She repeats it: the alibi was false. And then she adds what she'd never said out loud before: Ryan asked her to lie. More than that, she says he confessed to her. And what she describes next is even heavier. Pam claims that night Ryan drove her to Rick and Gail's house and showed her the bodies. And then he made it clear directly that if she went to police or told anyone, she would be killed. Pam says she regrets staying silent. At first, she lied to protect him. Later, she says, she lied to protect herself. And as the years went on, the fear only grew. She worried that if the truth ever came out, she'd lose her kids. But now, more than 20 years later, she finally begins laying out what happened that night in detail. From this point on, the timeline can be pieced together almost hour by hour. Saturday, November 21, 1987. Rick and Gail leave for a wedding. According to case records, they left the reception around 11 p.m., the last confirmed time anyone saw them alive. That same evening, Ryan is at Pam's place. He has baskets of dirty laundry with him. Pam says they need to do wash, so they drive to Pete's laundromat sometime around 5 o'clock to 6 p.m., and they're back home around 8 p.m. After that, Ryan disappears for a few hours. Pam said he left without explaining where he was going, and she didn't push for answers. Later, he comes back. Pam said they smoke marijuana and have sex, and then Ryan leaves again. She later described that, at that point in his life, he may have been involved in illegal activity, and it felt easier for her not to ask questions, to stay out of it and pretend she didn't know the details. What comes next is what investigators piece together years later. Ryan drives to Rick and Gail's house angry. There had already been conflict between them. Ryan's parents had been living in a camper that was kept in his yard, and at some point, the question came up about moving that camper onto the Brinks property. Gail said no, and at the very least, it became a serious point of tension. When Ryan shows up without warning, Rick and Gail are already home. The conversation quickly turns into an argument. By this point, Rick is done tolerating Ryan's pressure and control, and he makes it clear it's not going to continue. Gail goes to the bedroom. Ryan leaves, or at least, that's how it looks at first. But as Pam later described it, Ryan couldn't just let it go. A short time later, he comes back and gets Rick to come outside again, claiming he's having car trouble and needs help. Rick, it seems, steps out to end the situation and put a final stop to it. Then it happens in seconds. Rick gets into his vehicle. The driver's window is partly down, and in that moment, shots ring out. Rick is hit twice on the left side of the head, still sitting in the driver's seat of his Blazer. After that, the killer goes into the house. Gail is in bed. She's shot in the head 3 times. Then a pillow is placed over her face. Whether she had time to understand what was happening, or to say anything, no one will ever know. After that, Ryan drives away, but according to Pam, he can't settle down, and he comes to her place not long after. Pam opens the door and asks what's going on, and Ryan says it flat out. He shot Rick and Gail, and they're dead. At first, Pam doesn't believe him. It sounds like some awful, unbelievable joke. But the longer he talks, the clearer it becomes he isn't joking. He tells her to get her things and says they're leaving. Pam gets into the car with him, and as they drive, she realizes he isn't heading somewhere. He's going back toward the Brinks home on Ransom Street. They pull into the driveway and stop next to Rick's vehicle. Even in the dark, Pam can see Rick inside, slumped in a position that doesn't look human. He isn't moving. In that moment, she knows Ryan wasn't lying. Then, Pam says, Ryan takes her into the house, into the bedroom. Gail is there. And Ryan says something Pam says she never forgot. Then he leans in and makes the threat clear, with no room for misunderstanding. If she goes to police or tells anyone, the same thing will happen to her. When they leave, Pam is sitting beside him in shock. And during the drive, Ryan tells her exactly what she's going to say if anyone asks. That they were together all night doing laundry, stopping by a friend's place, then going home. Pam says she was terrified and broken down, and she decided to cover for him to protect herself and to protect her son. Years pass. Pam and Ryan get married. More children are born into the family. Pam tries to keep living, convincing herself it's behind her now. But when investigators come back to the case, the camper argument sounds too small to thin to explain a double murder like this. And later, Pam says it directly. It wasn't about the camper. In her view, the real issue ran deeper control. Gail wasn't afraid of her brother anymore. She was becoming independent, and Ryan was losing power over someone he'd always felt he could control. And there was another fear underneath it. He worried Gail might tell Rick what had happened between them when they were younger, and that the secret would finally come out. Did Gail tell Rick the truth? Did Rick tell Ryan that night that he already understood what was going on? If so, that could have been the trigger. Ryan is arrested the same day, and once investigators start pressing him after Pam's statement, he denies everything. He says he might have been high that night, and that's why he supposedly doesn't remember what happened. In his words, if parts of the night are missing, that would explain it. But the line, "I was high, I don't remember anything," doesn't convince anyone. After Pam's testimony, Ryan is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The trial begins in March 2014 and lasts about 3 weeks. A long list of witnesses takes the stand, dozens of them, more than 100 in total. Among them are Ryan's relatives, including his sisters, and the prosecution's key witness, Pam. She testifies in detail about what Ryan told her, that he confessed, that he drove her to the Brinks home that night, showed her the bodies, and threatened her. During Pam's testimony, Ryan snaps right there in the courtroom. He shouts at her, insults her, and calls her an evil woman with a black heart. He becomes so aggressive that he's removed from the courtroom. The defense, of course, offers a different story. Ryan says he doesn't understand why his wife is accusing him, and he claims he forgives her. The defense also leans on the idea that traumatic experiences can distort memory, that someone can unintentionally construct a false version of events. The prosecution's expert argues the opposite. In the end, the jury is left with two competing explanations, each backed by an expert. Ryan sticks to his own account. He admits he planned to talk to Gail the evening of November 21st about the camper, but says he didn't have any gas and never went anywhere. He claims he only learned about the murders on Monday afternoon when he went to see family, meaning, by his logic, he couldn't have been involved. As it becomes clear the case is headed toward a verdict, Ryan starts accusing everyone around him. He claims the investigation was mishandled, says police pressured his wife and sisters into turning on him, and calls the court corrupt and dishonest. On March 28, 2014, the jury deliberates for about 4 hours and returns a verdict: guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Rick Brink and Gail Brink. Ryan is sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. Soon after the trial, Pam files for divorce. She had spent nearly 25 years alongside Ryan, a man who killed his sister and her husband, and carried that secret inside the family for decades. A lot of people later judged Pam for staying silent, but in the end, it was her decision to speak that finally brought the case to a verdict. Rick and Gail's parents died without ever knowing who truly killed their children. It's hard to sit with the fact that the truth was so close for so long. But Pam can also be seen as a victim in this story. She says that night Ryan drove her to the crime scene, showed her the bodies, and terrified her. And the threats didn't stop. They hung over her for years. At the time, Pam had a young son. As the years passed, the lie followed her and grew heavier, and getting out of it became harder and harder. She says she was only able to talk when the detectives who reopened the case gave her a way to tell the truth without fear. After the conviction, the case is officially closed. Ryan continues to claim he's innocent from prison, but the verdict stands. As for motive, it was never reduced to one clean sentence, but investigators and prosecutors tied the case to the idea that Ryan was trying to keep what happened between him and Gail as teenagers from ever coming to light. What do you think about this case? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, hit subscribe, it really helps the channel. See you in the next video.